Sound disappears to some other town 5 miles away. But I certainly want to, I'm going to take these guys on the road. We're certainly going to, as long as the band is the cheapest one in town, that's what you're going to hear him with, because Chuck believes that Chuck's enough. He doesn't need a band. And because he certainly weren't there for the first 18 or 19 years of my life. There was no such thing. I grew up, but
Keith Richards has seen it all. From the sweaty backrooms of dingy clubs to the roaring stadiums where rock history is made, the Rolling Stones guitarist has spent decades surrounded by legends. And if there's one thing Richards knows, it's genius when he sees it. His taste has always been razor sharp, his praise rare, and his loyalty fierce. While the world often hears his gruff critiques of modern acts, there are a select few musicians, both men and women, who have earned his unwavering respect. Before naming his top 4 female rockers of all time, Richards revealed the 5 male geniuses who, in his words, made rock and roll what it is. But when it came to the women, his choices spanned soul, gospel, blues, and pure rock attitude. These aren't just singers. They're forces of nature. Let's dive into the stories, the collaborations, and the moments that cemented their place in Richards' Hall of Fame.
Because he certainly weren't there for the first 18 or 19 years of my life. There was no such thing. I grew up, but I understand that it's true,
What would have first priority, playing with a band on your own, or if you could get the others of the Rolling Stones together?
I wouldn't want to put it in a matter of priorities. The priority thing is unimportant to me. What would now be important to me, having done this and put this band together and made this record, is that I'm quite prepared to do both. I would like to be able to do both. I didn't do this one record and just say, right, I've done my solo record, boom, close the shop, go back to the Stones. You grow up, I think that's the idea, is to grow up, It's very hard to pretend to be 25 when you're 44, And I think that having started something like this and found another great band to work with, that I want to keep them both together, and just, so then it's a matter of, certainly not me, because I'm no good at paperwork and schedules and logistics and stuff, but saying, figuring out how to do that, And that's certainly what would be my aim.
Where do you prefer to live these days?
Before shining a spotlight on his chosen women, Richards casually rattled off a list that could double as the DNA blueprint of rock and roll. Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Fats Domino, Eddie Cochran, and Buddy Holly. 5 names that, according to him, are pretty easy to spot if you know your rock history. Each was a pioneer, shaping the raw energy, swagger, and sound that would influence generations. Chuck Berry's guitar riffs and stagecraft were the very foundation of Richards' own playing. Little Richard's wild abandon and flamboyant charisma rewrote the rules of performance. Fats Domino brought melody and groove. Eddie Cochran injected teenage rebellion. And Buddy Holly proved songwriting could be both simple and brilliant. By starting here, Richards was setting the bar impossibly high. It was a way of saying, these are the benchmarks. Now, let's see which women match that same level of game-changing greatness.
We learned in rock school at home that moss doesn't grow on a rolling stone. How do you feel about that?
I never was at rock school.
But I learned it at school at home.
Is that what they say? I don't know. You can get some fungus. I don't know, but what can I say about a thing like that? It's you just got to keep moving. Yeah, anything will grow on something if it stays still. So you have to keep moving.
That's the secret about things.
Fast move.
What triggered you to make the LP on your own, finally?
The fact that I'd found the right band, the right group of musicians to work with, that were all friends with each other, that are friends of mine. So they weren't just like a hired help, you know, they're just how much for you, how much, you know, they were friends, and they were very dedicated to the task of doing it. And also that I need to work. I need to work very much, otherwise I go mad, you know.
With the male geniuses acknowledged, Richards turned his attention to the women. And here, his tone shifted from casual admiration to almost reverent respect. He wasn't simply listing singers with great voices. He was picking artists who embodied the very essence of rock and roll. These women, he implied, could tear down a stage and light a cigarette in the same breath. It's not just about vocal power. It's about attitude, musicianship, presence, and the ability to command any room without asking for permission. His choices covered multiple genres: gospel, soul, pop, and blues. Some had crossed paths with the Stones, others carved their own paths entirely. But each of them had, in Richards' view, left an unshakable mark on the culture. His list was a rare peek into the influences that shaped him, and it made one thing clear. The women of rock weren't just keeping up. They were leading the charge.
Infinitely preferable to work than to go mad.
Definitely so. It has a very raw sound to it. I mean, it seems you avoided most of the technicality that's available nowadays.
I wouldn't say I avoided it. I've used it in different ways. I've used it, but still managed to keep the edge and the roughness that I need to make my sound. I'm trying to use technology as a tool instead of just playing with toys, you know. I mean, a lot of it to me is a lot of kids in a big toys shop, you know, just sort of saying, oh, here it is, let's, you know, push this button and push this one, just because it's there. I think that technology is something, is a tool, it's not a plaything. You know?
You're not too crazy about the Stock Aitken and Waterman style of today's music.
I'm not impressed by pushing buttons to try and get a drum sound. I'm not impressed by sampling other people's old records. To me, it's sterile and old-fashioned. You know, it's been done. That was that record then. To me, it's cheap.
Your latest...
At the very top of Richards' list was Aretha Franklin, the undisputed queen of soul. For him, her ranking was never in doubt. Richards has always been outspoken about his admiration for Aretha, not just for her towering voice, but for her musicianship. He knew something many overlooked. She wasn't only a singer, she was a phenomenal pianist, and the combination of those talents elevated her performances to another plane. To Richards, Aretha didn't just sing a song. She inhabited it, lived it, and transformed it into something that hit the listener's soul. Her blend of gospel roots, soul fire, and technical mastery made her a once-in-a-lifetime talent. Richards didn't see her as a soul artist in a narrow sense. He saw her as one of the purest embodiments of musical truth. In his eyes, she was every bit as revolutionary to music as Barry or Holly had been to rock and roll.
Performance with Chuck Berry was, I think, a fine experience for the moviegoers, but maybe you had a different experience on stage.
It was a fine experience for me. I didn't expect it to be easy. Just because something's difficult to do doesn't mean that you can't enjoy it, as long as you know it's going to be difficult. Yeah. And I'm used to working with difficult people. I work with Mick Jagger. Chuck Berry, I have more experience working with difficult people than most. And also I thought, well, if I can handle that, then only the idea of making God's first album would be maybe more difficult. You know? So I can now, it was a test for myself as well as something that I really wanted to do and in a way had to do. You know.
You feel you paid your depth to
Well, to a certain extent, yes. I feel that wasn't the main thing. To me, it was an opportunity to make, for one time, not just a record, but also on film, at least one example of good live Chuck Berry music. And I figured that this was maybe the last time that the possibility would arise to do that, because Chuck doesn't really take too much care about his live performances.
In 1986, Richards got the chance to work directly with his idol. Aretha recorded a powerhouse cover of the Rolling Stones' Jumpin' Jack Flash for her self-titled album, which also served as the theme for a Whoopi Goldberg film. Richards co-produced the track and played guitar, but he had one very specific condition. She had to play the piano while she sang. If you can get her to do both at the same time, you get this extra kick, he explained. Aretha agreed, telling him, "Nobody's asked me to do that for ages." The only hurdle? Her fear of flying. She refused to travel for the session. Without hesitation, Richards brought the band to Detroit. Alongside Ronnie Wood and Steve Jordan, they cut a version that fused soul's gospel fire with rock's edge. The result wasn't just a cover. It was a collision of two musical worlds, each amplifying the other.
As long as the band is the cheapest one in town, that's what you're going to hear him with, because Chuck believes that Chuck's enough. He doesn't need a band. And I rehearsed the band and Chuck Berry for almost 2 weeks, and Chuck believes that it's the band that's being rehearsed. Wouldn't occur to Chuck that in actual fact it's him that's being rehearsed. That would never occur to him, you see.
How do you see the outlook for the almost vintage combination of sex, drugs and rock and roll in 1988?
It's a neat phrase, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And but I've been doing this gig for a long time, and it to me that's just it's a good PR phrase, but it has very, very little to do with the day-to-day life of making music and making records. It's a neat phrase to encapsulate an image, but it's if it was that easy, I'd be very happy, but it isn't that easy, you know.
In the past, your name has been very much associated with busts and different sanctions from society.
True.
You don't go to prisons anymore.
No, I sign autographs for cops now. But no, I'm not. I'm no longer a target for those people. And anyway, the people that did, for one reason or another, try and put me in jail.
The following year, 1987, Richards had the honor of inducting Aretha into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, making her the first woman ever to receive the accolade. His speech was heartfelt, but tinged with that wry Richards charm. "The dictionary's been used up. There's no superlatives left," he said, before simply adding, "You're in, baby." It was a fitting way to honor someone whose impact transcended language. By then, Aretha's career had already spanned decades, with anthems like Respect, Natural Woman, and Think, defining not only the sound of an era, but the spirit of empowerment itself. When she passed in 2018, Richards called it a sad day, but celebrated her as a glorious lady whose voice says it all. For him, Aretha wasn't just a singer. She was a force that could make a rock anthem sound like a gospel hymn, elevating everything she touched.
Usually did it for the wrong reason, and in fact some of them are actually in jail now, and I'm not. It's justice will out. One has to believe that. And I was just an easy target for ambitious policemen.
But it seems now that, for instance, in the United States during the elections, that the war on drugs has become a major issue.
You'll always have a war on drugs when there's an election in America. The last election was fought on the same issue, and in actual fact you did have no war on drugs at all. In fact, they were monitoring a war with Nicaragua, and they would let drugs into the country in order that the planes could turn around and ship some guns and supplies back to their so-called freedom fighters. I don't know one way or the other. I don't know much about Nicaragua, and certainly living in America, you only get a one-sided story. You know, but I mean, anybody that hangs around and kisses Noriega, some dodgy company, you know. So war on drugs, yeah, you'll have one while this election's going on, and then they'll forget all about it again. Yeah.
But you didn't have an easy time getting off the hook yourself.
Next on his list was Ronnie Spector, ranked number 11 on his all-time greatest singers, above Otis Redding and even Elvis Presley. To Richards, Ronnie was more than a girl group icon. She was one of the most emotionally resonant voices ever recorded. Best known as the lead singer of the Ronettes, Ronnie's blend of vulnerability and defiance cut through Phil Spector's wall of sound production and landed straight in the listener's heart. Her voice could be sweet one moment and drenched in attitude the next. Richards admired her, not just for the hits, but for the emotional honesty she brought to pop music. He saw her as timeless, not locked in the 1960s, but as a standard of vocal authenticity that newer artists could still learn from. In his mind, Ronnie wasn't nostalgia. She was proof that pop could carry the same weight and truth as the grittiest rock.
It's never easy to get off the hook, but to me it was a personal thing that I got into. It wasn't my idea to splash it all over the newspapers, all over the world, that I took drugs or anything. It was something that I felt that I had to deal with personally. They felt that they had to make it a certain cause, you know. I mean, as I say, I was a very easy target because, yes, I was taking drugs. But a lot of the drugs I got actually accused of having weren't actually mine. They brought them with them. And, I mean, I had my drugs. They wouldn't even bother to look for them. They would just what's this? You know, I mean, it's you learn a certain amount of things about the fragility of society and civilization by going through things like that. And really, you just try and learn lessons, you know, and you learn things that otherwise you wouldn't even bother about. But I found out.
What kind of drugs would you recommend for a young, sane person?
I don't recommend drugs for anybody. It's totally up to anybody by themselves. What I recommend for people is to learn their own capabilities, their own limitations, and I mean, I certainly wouldn't recommend taking drugs to anybody, you know, especially not for Ben Johnson.
Richards first heard Ronnie live in 1964, when the Ronettes toured with the Rolling Stones. He remembers wandering backstage and hearing voices echoing down a stairwell. Nedra and Estelle setting up harmonies, and then, over the top, that unmistakable lead. Ronnie singing "Be My Baby." He was floored. They didn't need the studio's lush arrangements to sound big. They could, as he put it, sing their way right through a wall of sound. That moment cemented his admiration. To him, Ronnie's voice was pure rock and roll spirit wrapped in pop's velvet glove. It had grit without losing beauty, and charm without losing bite. That first encounter wasn't just an introduction to a singer. It was an awakening to the power of a voice that could stop you mid-step and make you forget where you were headed. For Richards, that kind of impact is the definition of greatness.
We had another phrase saying the greatest rock and roll band in the world, and I believe that you had the feeling sometimes when you got off stage that really did something which would satisfy you?
At any different night, some band is the greatest rock and roll band in the world. Some nights, yeah, maybe it was the Rolling Stones. Other nights we knew we definitely weren't. It would depend on the situation, on the show. So you try to, you do your best. Some nights something takes over the whole stage and you're looking at your fingers and you're saying, this can't be me, it's too good, I don't play like this, but you have really no control on it. And you say, well, tonight we were visited by the spirit and maybe we were the greatest rock and roll band just for that night. But some nights you know damn well that some other band down the road did a lot better job than you did. Yeah.
You don't feel you have a kind of championship you have to defend?
No, it's not run on those lines, is it? No, music isn't run on, you don't get a gold medal. You get gold records now and again, but it's all promotion. That's why I'm talking to you now.
But last time we saw you in Scandinavia, I saw you in Gothenburg.
Gothenburg, yeah.
I mean, it was...
Richards would go on to induct the Ronettes into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2007, delivering a speech full of affection and respect. Years before that, he and Ronnie had collaborated in the studio, recording tracks for her 2006 album, The Last of the Rock Stars. One memorable session in 2001 saw Ronnie on one mic and Richards on another, while punk icon Joey Ramone sat silently in the control room, awestruck. For Joey, seeing those two in the same space was like watching history unfold. Ronnie recalled that Joey didn't move the entire time. He was simply transfixed. Tragically, it was one of the last times she saw him before his passing. For Richards, those moments in the studio weren't just about making music. They were about connecting across eras, genres, and personal histories. With Ronnie, every note carried decades of rock and roll's beating heart.
It's very much you who got the band on the road again, wasn't it so?
Well, I like to work the road, so in a way I do. I miss the road now because I haven't worked the road since '82, except for jumping up on stage in a club here and there, and if somebody says, hey, come up and play, I'll be there like a shot, because I really think it's necessary for a musician to play face-to-face to the audience, and I think that gives you more incentive and more ideas to produce better music. And which is why, to me, if you write songs, you make records, and you don't go on the road, then you're isolating yourself from the people that are going to listen to the music. So you're really chickening out. You have to work the stage. You have to work to people face to face. It's the other part of the job, and it'll help the other part of the job.
But what's your idea now? I mean, do you have any ambition of getting on the road again?
Yeah, I want to take this band that I've worked on this album on the road. I'm going to play some good theatres to start with, because it's a new job for me, and I want to figure out what kind of show I can do and how I can do it, and I want to do it in places where I can guarantee that the band is going to sound real good. I don't want to play open air places where you never know if it's going to rain or the wind is blowing this way.
Ranked at number 13, Mavis Staples represented something deeper for Richards, a direct link between gospel's sacred roots and rock's rebellious spirit. As part of the Staples Singers, Mavis's rich contralto-anchored songs like Respect Yourself and I'll Take You There, which became anthems for both faith and civil rights. Richards openly credits the group's gospel track, This May Be the Last Time, as the inspiration for the Rolling Stones' first major hit, The Last Time. Over the years, he and Mavis developed a warm friendship with public birthday tributes and mutual praise. For Richards, Mavis wasn't just a singer. She was a national treasure whose voice spoke to the heart of America. Her ability to balance sacred messages with mainstream success, all while staying grounded and authentic, made her one of the few artists who could inspire both his musical craft and his respect for music's power to change lives.
Sound disappears to some other town 5 miles away, but I certainly want to, I'm going to take these guys on the road. We're certainly going to do it. In fact, they'll kill me if I don't.
It's going to be called the
I don't know if we're going to stick with it. That's the name's kind of sticking, but to us it was just our own code word for ourselves while we were making the album, and it was the name written on all the tape boxes, because you don't write Keith Richards and leave a bunch of tape boxes lying around in studios, because you know that somebody's going to go in there and bootleg it. So you make up the Stones. Various times have been known as the Bulldogs, the green-shoed London Cowboys, anything except the Rolling Stones. So you make up a code name every time, you know. So I don't know if that name is going to stick, but everybody in the expensive winos, as they're now known, is very proud of being in that band, no matter what name we end up calling it. You know. It certainly won't be the Keith Richards Orchestra.
How do you go about life? I mean,
I get up in the morning and I breathe, and I put some food in, and I drink a little water, take the dog for a walk. You know, I live as normally as possible. Yeah.
With all the time in the world and money to go around.
Money is, to me, it's very nice to have, but an awful lot of it goes on lawyers. Their overheads are enormous.
Closing his list was Bonnie Raitt, the youngest of the 4 women, but no less legendary. A slide guitar master with a smoky, soulful voice. Raitt built her career blending blues, folk, rock, and activism. She learned directly from Delta blues greats in her youth, bringing their traditions into a modern context. Richards admired her for staying true to her roots while achieving mainstream success, particularly after her Grammy-sweeping 1989 album, Nick of Time. For him, Bonnie represents perseverance and integrity in an industry that often sidelines women who don't chase trends. Her activism for environmental and social causes also struck a chord with him. Proof that music can be a tool for change. With 18 studio albums and a career still thriving more than 50 years on, Raitt's inclusion on Richards' list wasn't just about skill. It was about embodying the values he believes define a true rock and roll artist. Keith Richards' top 4 female rockers, Aretha Franklin, Ronnie Spector, Mavis Staples, and Bonnie Raitt, aren't just names on a list. They're artists who, in his eyes, match the genius of the men who built rock and roll. Each brought something irreplaceable. Aretha's transcendent soul power, Ronnie's pop meets rock emotional punch, Mavis's gospel-rooted truth, and Bonnie's bluesy authenticity. For Richards, these women weren't female musicians. They were simply some of the best to ever do it, period. His admiration wasn't rooted in trends or sales. It was grounded in decades of shared stages, studio sessions, and deep musical understanding. Together, they paint a picture of a music world where talent, truth, and attitude matter most. And if Keith Richards, a man who's played with nearly every legend alive, says you belong among the greats, you can bet you've earned your place in rock and roll immortality.